Hi, you're listening to Immigrant Women Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Galina Bilaeva. This is the place for you to get inspired by stories of immigrant women, to learn about nonprofits that serve immigrant communities, and to listen to entrepreneurs who work with women in developing countries. Subscribe to this podcast and get more inspiration and resources at immigrantwomentalk.org.
Hi, I'm Galina Bilaeva, and my guest today is AngelaJo TouzaMedina, and Angela is the chairperson of Immigrant Services Network of Austin, Texas. This organization is a network of immigration advocates and service providers who work with immigrant communities in Austin. And Angela is also vice chair at the Commission on Immigrant Affairs, and she holds a lot of other positions. And also, what are other organizations that you work with, and why do you do so many things at the same time?
I also serve on the Central Texas Coalition Against Human Trafficking. I serve on, oh my God, now I'm drawing a blank. I'm the principal of Intelligo Consulting Services, and what we do through there is we provide organizations and communities the tools that they need to change the way they understand the world around them. Because I think that sometimes we get stuck in a paradigm of what we think or the way we think the world is, and that's our box. And unless we're able to kind of break out of that, it's hard to devise innovative solutions to the issues that are affecting the people we serve and the communities we live in. I think one of the reasons that I am so active is because I feel it's my responsibility. I feel it's the responsibility of each and every one of us to try to improve the communities that we're part of. In particular, I'm very active on immigrant issues, and particularly female immigrant issues. That's one of my big areas of interest, because it resonates with me, with my womanhood, and I think that often when we can connect to something, there's greater passion for it, and it's linked to my background because I've lived in several different countries. I have some understanding of an immigrant experience. And most of my studies have been in either international humanitarian law or international development. And for me, immigration is, let's say, the national side of development issues, because people don't leave their countries of origin unless they truly feel that that's the only way that they're going to be able to survive and thrive.
Right. So going back to the Immigrant Services Network of Austin, how many people, how many organizations are members of this organization? And
we have 30 member organizations.
Right, okay. And how many immigrants do you serve? Is there some sort of estimate?
Actually, that's interesting. There is, and I may have to send you documentation. May have to check back on this and get back to you. But there are approximately, so through the U.S. Census, we don't really get a feeling for how many immigrants there are in Travis County, because that's not something that we really ask about. But what we do ask about is how many people don't speak, what percentage of the population is English not really their primary language, or is there another language that's also spoken at home? And right now, we're at approximately 28-30% of the population of Austin, Travis County, that speak a language other than English at home.
And where do they usually come from? What kind of language do they speak?
The largest language groups are Spanish. There is a large influx of, there are many Chinese speakers, Vietnamese, Korean, and in fact, the largest immigrant population that's growing right now in Travis County is the Asian immigrant population. Then there are also smaller groups, more diverse language communities that are basically, they're mostly coming from refugee populations that are being resettled in Travis County.
Mm-hmm. In what immigrant stories do you find especially inspiring?
Oh, for me, most immigrant stories are inspiring because there is a level of gumption and struggle and desire to come out ahead. I mean, it can be from the story of a refugee family from Iraq or a Cuban refugee that are deciding that, the conditions are no longer sustainable in their country of origin, or they're actually leaving because they meet the definition of refugees according to the 1951 convention. It could be an Afghani family, and they come with a small bag of belongings, a suitcase, their IOM bag, and they start with that. I mean, the agencies, the resettlement agencies can help provide housing, but within a month to 3 months, these families need to be able to make it all by themselves. And they are resilient. And that resilience for me is inspiring.
So these are organizations that help them. What kind of help do they provide, and how long can they do that, really? You mentioned 1 month only?
No, so it all depends. So generally, the refugees can get up to 6 months of services. It includes first housing, furnishing the housing so that when they arrive to a home. It's helping them get their first contract, their first lease. It's preparing them for employment for their first survival job in the United States. It's preparing them to acculturate to this society by providing them the tools and the knowledge they need so that they aren't that lost.
Right.
It's providing English as a second language services as well.
I read that you also screen movies at the organization for the community to watch together. And that's only for the locals, right? It's not for immigrants as well. It's just for the locals. And how do you think that helps? What kind of discussions do these movies bring?
Well, what we're hoping is that I think the movie you're referring to is like The Other Side of Immigration.
Probably.
That we're going to be screening at the next Immigrant Services Network of Boston meeting. And I think that is for our service providers, because sometimes what happens is that you are so stuck in the nitty-gritty of what you're doing every day, and you realize where people are coming from, but you become a little, not jaded, but it becomes your everyday. So we're hoping that through the screening of these movies that kind of illustrate the realities from which some of our clients come, the beneficiaries of our programs come, we will, it kind of reinvigorates that passion that you have. Because sometimes, burnout happens to anyone. And sometimes you need to remember, okay, this is why I do this. I do this because someone is coming from the situation, or someone is needing something, and I can overcome the feeling of sometimes, you feel like you're swimming up current. You're trying and you're doing things, but you're you don't feel like you're really making a difference in the big scheme of things. And sometimes it's that the perspective that we're trying to provide of that greater scheme of things, where we can realize that, a drop in the ocean is still a drop of water, and it's still an important part. The ocean is made up of drops of water. So, kind of reinvigorating that passion in a very roundabout way.
Right. What kind of movies would you recommend to watch?
I would recommend watching movies that, so The Other Side of Immigration. There is a movie that I recently watched about, it's called 33 Postcards. It is an Australian movie, and it talks about deciding whether you want to leave your country of origin or not, within a very different context than that economic context. And, and also that battle between, do I stay or do I come? There is the movie God Grew Tired of Us, that talks about the plight of the Sudanese refugees, and that's a very powerful film. There is a movie called, I don't remember the exact title, but it is, I don't remember, and I don't really want to quote it wrong, but basically it's a movie that talks about what would happen if all the immigrants, for instance, in California left. What kind of an impact would that have on our economies? Because immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants, feed a lot into the U.S. economy. However, and they don't really, in terms of where they feed into Social Security. They don't ever go back and claim the money that they fed into Social Security because they can't. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they feed into the economy in a way where they're not really getting anything in return, long term.
Right.
You know, mm-hmm.
Most of them work in food, like fields, right? The farming.
They're migrant workers. Domestic laborers. There are construction workers. The restaurant industry. Mm-hmm. There's many immigrants are placed in unskilled jobs. And often what happens is even when you have immigrants that are very skilled, for example, we in Austin, we receive Cuban medical professionals, right? That are leaving Cuba because they don't agree with the regime there. They come to Austin and they have to start maybe working at a hotel because the process of convalidating their studies to the United States system is extremely long and convoluted. It can be up to 10 years. So in the meantime, people take the first job they can to do the best that they can and survive.
I'm very interested in the way immigrant women integrate into the society. So what kind of programs are available for women in Austin?
So there are various programs. There are different nonprofits that kind of piecemeal, parenting classes here, public safety classes here. And by public safety, what I mean is where the police comes and explains to immigrant women, this is what's legal in this country, this is what is illegal in this country. And it also helps them feel more welcome and less afraid of the authorities. Personally, I advocate for a model which is based on a social networking model. And it's a 360 approach. So traditionally, we have had agencies that are the intermediaries between the immigrant population and the rest of the community. And in the model that I advocate for and I developed, basically you have the immigrant that is at the center. It's like the center node in the network. And you bring all the agencies with whom that immigrant is going to have to interact to that person and surround them with those contacts. So for instance, one of the organizations with which I work, what we do is we have refugee cultural orientation. And in the context of refugee cultural orientation, it's a week long. And we bring Austin Police Department, we bring the fire department, we bring the school district, we bring health providers, we bring organizations that help people get tuition assistance. We bring organizations that work with women in the context of domestic violence to talk about healthy relationships. And what we try to do is we try to inform the immigrants, and in this case, the refugees, of everything, all the points in which the paradigm that they're coming from might be different from the paradigm of their host community. Mm-hmm. And that serves twofold. I mean, it benefits the refugee because, for instance, refugees, they are refugees because there's a credible fear of persecution from governmental authorities or someone in power. Well, if you bring a police officer in full uniform to tell them, I'm here to help you, and that's my job, it builds trust. It builds trust with the host community. And at the same time, it raises awareness with all the providers that are coming to talk to the refugees about the different refugees populations, about that we're resettling in Austin, and about the diversity of our community. Particularly in the case of women refugees, one thing that I'm really working very heavily on right now is on gender mainstreaming and adding a gender perspective to the work that we do. Because often what happens is female refugees come in a family context, and that family context brings with them the culture of origin. And that culture of origin may not be there may not be as much gender parity in the culture of origin as we aspire to here. And I say aspire to because the United States still hasn't reached, gender equality as such.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to start dialogues with refugee women from different origin and refugee men. With refugee women about the differences in womanhood between the concept of womanhood in their culture of origin in the United States, and about how the concept of womanhood has evolved in the United States. What were the cultural, historical, and social constructs that led to that change, right? And then at the same time with the men, because again, as much as women may have certain rights that they're not afforded in their cultures of origin, if within the family dynamic there isn't an awareness of that, it's very hard for them to break out of that box. So with the men talking about what is the value that your women bring to your home, because women's work is natural work. Do you see what I'm saying? It's caretaking, it's child rearing, it's taking care of the home. Well, that's considered natural work. So that's considered women's work in certain cultures. And in that, it's not allocated a financial value. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping to start having conversations with our male immigrants about, this is how much money you save because your wife stays at home and takes care of your children. And this is how much money your wife would be making somewhere else doing the same kind of work that she does for you all. And how do you understand manhood? Let's talk about kind of helping move to a more healthy definition of manhood, which I think is something that regardless of whether we're talking about immigrant populations or men in general, is a dialogue that we have to start having.
And what is their response to that usually?
Well, that's something that we're working on, and generally, they'll hear it, and I'm not sure how much they take in. Do you see what, like women, their eyes light up because they're sitting in the same class, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is the value that my work has. Whereas men, I don't feel that they actually get the essence of it yet, but that's okay, because one of the principles of adult learning is repetition. And especially when you're thinking of individuals that have just arrived to a country, that they're stressed out about finding a job, about making ends meet, about learning English. One thing that we know is we have to repeat things over and over and over again, and they have to hear it from different people so that it really sinks in.
What is the general attitude towards immigrants in Texas?
So I would think, so let me tell you this, in terms of Travis County where I live, one of the things that the city of Austin has just done is it has declared itself to be a welcoming city to immigrants, which means that it's part of this welcoming cities and counties initiative across the United States of regional, the county, and city entities that are saying we're welcoming communities. We recognize and welcome the good things that immigrants bring into our community, the way they add to our economic wealth and diversity, the way they add to the fabric of our community, and how they enrich every spectrum of society. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, I feel that Central Texas, Austin, and Travis County in particular, is a very welcoming community to immigrants, where we see our police department, we see our city government doing what it can to address the needs of our immigrant community. And I would actually also go so far as to say that Travis County, the county that where we live, was one of the founding members of the Immigrant Services Network of Austin. Initially they provided staff support, now they're a member, but that speaks to how important they think immigrants are.
Yeah, okay. AngelaJo, thank you so much for coming over. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And,
likewise, I'm so happy.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for listening to Immigrant Women Talk podcast. I would love to get to know you, so come over to immigrantwomentalk.org and leave a comment. Let me know about your challenges, and I will find an expert who will offer a solution. If you would like to join the community of immigrant women, connect with the guests or with me, go to immigrantwomentalk.org. I'm Galina Bilaeva, and I will talk to you next time.